All right. Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Okay. So most of you know me already. I just want to introduce myself, and also because we're recording this, everybody needs to know who I am. I'm David. I am the primary instructor over here in the lathe area. I'm also the lathe area steward, and I do miscellaneous stuff around the site as well. So the format today is going to be a little bit loose and free form. Okay. I'm going to start off with doing a really quick little demo on finishing up the very end of a project. And then I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to have a couple of people who have recently started turning, and recently means within probably the past year. They're going to be working back and forth. I'll be wandering around. I might interrupt them. I might go in and do some narration about what they're doing. And if you folks have any questions at any time, please let me know. Okay. One of the things that you'll notice that we do practice around here is a high amount of personal safety. So I recommend both safety glasses, and this is absolutely mandatory when anybody turns here at assembly. Okay. So I'll be putting this on, taking it off, and excuse me if I get a few microphone bumps while I'm moving this up and down. Okay. So let me come back here and I'll start off. And let's see, let me get my light going here. All right. So what I'm doing here is this is towards the end of a project. I know it may sound a little silly to start with the end of a project rather than the beginning, but I want to show you how quickly something can be finished and done. What I'm making here is a spinning top. Pretty simple, straightforward project. What I've taken it to is the rough turning. I've then gone in and refined the turning down in here to make the bottom of the top. I've gotten most of the stem set. I've got a little work to do on the stem. But before I finished that stem, what I did was I sanded the bottom and put finish on it. The reason I did that is because in this state, this thing is pretty fragile. I could, a little too much pressure right here, this thing would come right off. So that too much pressure could come from excess sanding or turning or anything like that, even putting finish on. So I had to be really careful with it. That's why I'm starting right here, because I didn't want to have an accident right at the very beginning of this. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to grab one of the tools. Yep. Actually, it started as a square piece of wood, I'll show you that in a minute. Let me grab one of the scrapers here. Okay. Grab a small scraper, and I'm going to get some finish. And I'm going to get a little rag here. And one other tool I need is one of these, and this is a parting tool. Okay. I'm arming the lathe and helmet down. Start. And I'm going to spin that up to about 800 RPM. Now, one of the things that I explain in class to people is when we do wood lathe work, it's a little different than, say, a metal lathe, because a metal lathe, you have very particular speeds you have to hit. In wood lathe, you need to hit a speed, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Within maybe 20 or 30 RPM, you're okay. So right now, my readout showing 105 RPM. I'm sorry, 805 RPM. I'm going to move the tailstock in because I want to get it as close as I can. And I'm going to do just a little bit of scraping work right here. And the scraper helps me refine the feel for that. And it also goes in and takes care of any of the tool marks I may have left over from rubbing the piece. And I'm not sure if the camera can pick that up, but all I'm getting off of that is very, very fine shavings, almost powder-like, okay? And then I'm feeling that it's a little rough there. Whoops, sorry, microphone got in my way. There we go. And Travis, to illustrate your question, it started off like this, okay? This is usually where you start off, okay? You can take these and take them over to the bandsaw and cut off the sharp corners. I usually don't. I just go in and start with this. All right, so let me do just a little bit more. That's what I was looking for, okay? So now you get a little finish, and all I need to do, because this is not really a showpiece, it's just really a quick demonstration, is I'm using a compound that has beeswax and food safe mineral oil and a couple of other food safe items on it. And when I do that, I want to pull the tailstock out of the way so I don't get tangled up in it, and then just apply it like that. And then I'll turn that speed up a little bit. I'm going to buff that up to, and it's sitting about 1500 RPM. Buff that up a little bit like that. And you can see, if you look close, how it's changed the color. Now I'm going to take that speed back down. Yes, sir. Because I did a really decent job with this, I really didn't need to sand it. I could have, and that's why I kept feeling it, because sometimes this will work and sometimes you still need to sand. But if you get a really good cut on it first, and then you do a follow-up with this, you quite often don't need to sand on some. That was a great question. So that's really good. I only had to pay him $10 for that question. So, okay. So now I'm going to use this guy to take that off. And this is the where people kind of tend to struggle a little bit. It's something that you kind of need to practice a bit for. Now, if you look at some YouTubers who turn, what they will do is they'll apply this to cut, and they'll immediately reach their hand over like this. And this is one of the things I caution people about, is you really don't want to get in between the tailstock and the material with your fingers, because it's pretty dangerous. Reaching over like this can be okay, but I don't need to do that right this second, because I can take that down just like that. Now that's getting pretty thin. Now at that point, if I tapped it, it would break off. Okay? I could now continue with this, or I've got a very fine Japanese razor saw that I could go over and get a really nice finish on the top. I'm kind of torn. How many people want me to do this? Raise your hand. How many people want the Japanese razor saw? Oh, that was close. All right, let's go ahead and do this. I figured everybody say, want to see if I could mess it up. So I'm reaching very carefully over the top. It's getting real close. You can see it wobbling. Okay. Very clearly wobbling. So we'll do both. Okay. There we go. No, no, you do not use the saw while it's spinning. Let's see if it works. Well, if I could spin the top, I'd be okay. But that's basically how you would finish out a project. During today, what's going to happen is these folks who accompany me, and I'm not going to pull them on camera right this minute. I'm just going to have them turn. I kind of surprised everybody and kind of undersold it to people and said, come on in, we'll just do an informal demo. And everybody's walking in and saying, there's cameras, there's chairs, there's people. That's okay. I think once they get turning, they're going to be fine. So I'll introduce them as they go and turn. So who's up first? Is it you? Let's go. Okay. I'll get my stuff out of the way here. Go ahead, just start.
I started turning.
There you go.
For
It's on.
Okay, can you hear me? So my name is Leonora. I started turning about a year ago. And my only regret this year is that I can't more. Not working on it. But I started making pens because I love this idea of picking this aesthetic, picking the color, picking the wood, picking the kit of the pen, and then you have a finished product. And I can make one after another, with very little time and financial investment, and then I have this handmade gift. So that's kind of where I am. Very much a beginner, so very different than David here.
Mhm.
But so when you make a pen, I don't know how many of you have made pens before, but essentially
the microphone to
it's
not
kind of
move as
fun
much.
because you pick the type of pen you want, whether a flip pen, a twisty pen, or one with a cap. You pick the color, like chrome, gold, and then you take the wood and you kind of put it all together and have paste, and it makes a really nice handmade gift. That's the finished product. And to make a pen, the first thing I need to do is use the wood, and then in a kit, it kind of look like this.
Yeah, the second,
And in it you'll find the barrel. And so the wood part is actually the size of the barrel. So we need to find a piece of wood, a scrap or a blank, and cut it so it fits.
Yeah, if you want to, or you could wait till she starts turning because she's going to cut and then she'll pass the drill off to you.
Put that
barrels will be in it already?
So right now, I will pull the size of the barrel, and have to cut the size of the barrel. Then I'll take the whole thing out, move that barrel in.
Thank you.
And
Mhm. Mhm. We'll certainly do that. We'll certainly do that. Okay. Moment. So one of the interesting things about drilling on a lathe is you're actually spinning the material, you're not spinning the bit. So the bit remains stationary like this. And you have to lock that thing down really well. And then you just advance the drill slowly. The idea here is you don't want a really high RPM on this. You want that nice moderate RPM. Okay. And at times you back it out because it doesn't normally clear. So you'll have to drill a little bit, back out, drill a little bit more.
Got a special drill?
No, it's a standard drill bit. You can use just about any drill bit you want. We also do drilling and boring operations, say if we're making a vase. So if I wanted to say make a vase out of this, now this started off life as a square piece of wood. I rounded it, put a tenon on the bottom. And if I was going to make a vase, then I would take a succession of increasing diameter bits to drill through. A lot of people, and I made this mistake when I was first starting out, is I thought I'd be better off by just going in and doing a very wide bit and getting it done with. It's not the best option. So if I wanted to do this, I would probably drill in maybe 3 or 4 successive steps because it's removing a lot of material. With a pen, you can do it in one set. Okay, that's a standard drill.
Get up to something over 3/4 of an inch. What kind of bit do you do?
I am typically using more of a boring bit or a Forstner bit. I can use a Forstner bit. I have used it at time. The problem with the Forstner bit, if you use the standard cup-sized Forstner bit, it develops a lot of heat and it really has a hard time rejecting it at that depth on its side. So what I have moved to is the more, I'm not sure if there's a specific name for this, but it's more of a fly cutter looking Forstner bit with wings on the outside, and those wings are carbide. So it's not the standard cup style. Okay. I've burned quite a few Forstner bits learning that process and burned a few pieces of wood doing that as well. I've also recently acquired some true boring bits. And I'm going to start trying to use those as well to see how those would work.
David, I'm curious, she just flipped the wood over. Do you have to be careful not to drill into the chuck? Or is the chuck hollow?
Actually, the chuck is hollow. The thing is, these lathes from here to out here, this is hollow. And one of the things that you'll notice is some of us use, like for example, that drill chuck that's holding the drill bit, and this one here that's holding this cup center. You might have a hard time ejecting that. Okay? And what we have is a very technical piece of material for that will help you. And that thing is this. It has a very technical name. It's called the knockout rod. So you just take it, insert it there, give it a shove or bang it a little bit, and whatever's stuck in there comes out. What's holding those in is what they call a Morse taper. And these are Morse taper number 2. of the size, which means it's not a straight end on the inside, it's tapered. Anything you put in there has a matching taper, and when you compression fit it in there, it grabs and holds.
How do you ensure it's center inch? You're gonna flip the material.
I don't put that.
Oh, this off and put this on your inch. Okay.
Get some, yeah.
Okay. No, that's okay. Mhm.
Yeah, and they talk about the RPM. That's never this stuff. Like lower RPM.
Correct.
Like a tape RPM. Say hey, like this wood or this diameter.
There's really not, because the wood, yeah, right. It's got to be stable. Yeah.
Be the same RPM you'd be using on a drill press.
No, it wouldn't be. No, I always drill at much lower RPM than I would anywhere else. That bit over on the drill press, that'd probably be a 1200, 1400 RPM. This one here, what speed are you running that at? Pardon me?
Is it more kind of like a feel then?
It's more of a feel, and see how it's drilling, because if this piece of wood that I started with the other day, I started cutting it, it was wax coated. And once I started getting into it, I noticed it was really wet. It's actually wet here in my hand. And that has an impact as well, because you don't know that until you start working with the piece of wood. So there's a little bit of feel in learning here.
So if it's wet, high, low.
I would probably do a little bit lower RPM, because what happens is you're going to build up some heat in there. And if you build up too much heat and it's wet, it's going to convert it to steam, which can actually crack the wood. So kind of something to keep an eye on. Did you get that? Okay, there we go. Okay, are you through? Okay. Okay, keep going. All right.
So actually, that does remind me with people asking about it being hollow earlier. One of the advantages of that is when you're drilling, you can actually use the light within the center, look through the side, see a light shine through that you go through. So it's an easy way to check.
What's that?
You can move on to somebody else.
Okay. Okay. Yep. That's what I did. I looked through the, and I didn't see any light, so we're not through yet. Okay. Also keep in mind that I don't think any of us are used to doing this in front of an audience. So it's a little different.
Maybe tell people about what a basic setup is like.
Okay,
You know, like
that's
shade, gouge, things like that.
great. That's a good point. So what we've got here are basically three different lathes. This one obviously has a little bit more horsepower to it, and this runs about a 2 horsepower motor. Thank you. And these other two over here are running about a 1 horsepower motor. Okay? The other thing that different lathes do is they give you a different amount of, there's a lot of these weird terms in lathes. And one of the terms is the diameter of something that you can cut here is defined by swing. Okay. So this has an 18-inch swing on it, which means I have a maximum diameter from the center point here all the way down to here of 9 inches, but I can load in an 18-inch piece. And part of the problem is, though, doesn't account for that guy right there. And if I need to slide that under the piece, like we're going to do here in a minute on this one, I'm stuck if I've got something really long. So what that means you have to do is you have to take this off, slide that over, put it back on, and then continue turning. And then when you want to move it again, repeat the process. So there's a lot of things over here in the wood lathe you kind of have to think ahead of time on. Okay, so keep that in mind. The controls for the lathe are pretty simple. You got on, off, and you got a dial that you set the RPM. The other control that you have to keep an eye on is the forward and reverse. This is always a little test quiz I give people in the wood lathe class is explain you always want to run the lathe in the forward position to cut. That means that the wood is turning towards you. Because otherwise, if you turn it backwards, the wood will come up under the material and it'll flop up and down on you. Okay, it doesn't cut. So the question is, why would I ever want to run it in reverse? These guys, yeah, exactly. Sanding. So with sanding, I want to run it in reverse because if I'm sanding it in the forward position, it's throwing all that dust right at me. If I run it in reverse, it throws it back the other way. So if we sand out here extensively, then we're going to throw all that sawdust towards you, which is one of the reasons I didn't use sandpaper today and I pre-sanded that part, is because I didn't want to go in and have everybody coated with sawdust, particularly right here in the splash zone. Okay, so those are some basic controls. The tailstock is used to support things or to use the drill in this case. And that's some of the basics there. It's a really simple machine. It doesn't require a whole lot of instruction around the drill, around the lathe itself. What does require instruction are these. Okay.
David, can I actually make a comment about that,
Absolutely.
sanding really quick? So if you throw it into reverse sand, absolutely make sure that the set screw is tightened to keep the chuck in place, because if you throw it in reverse, there's a high chance of it coming off. And a couple months ago, turning a large bowl, went to sand it, didn't check that, and it resulted in a fractured right shoulder. So you have to be extremely careful, because suddenly you'll have a 10-pound piece of wood flying 30 miles an hour at you. So be very careful, double check, triple check. Don't assume it's safe.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why we set all these chairs a little far back. Because we don't want anybody, just in case we have a dismount.
Chose the wrong chair.
No, I had that reserved for you.
Do check, there is still the chance of something going wrong.
That's correct.
Because
Again, what you
wood could be brittle,
Yeah.
too heavy.
This is why I always wear the face shield. Now, I've also had a dismount here. And it was, a little over a year ago. I had set it up and I was pretty sure that I had set this thing up just right. And the first touch of the tool to the piece, it came off, hit my face shield square, took the face shield off my head, and I looked down and the face shield is next to the piece of wood on the floor. So it's always important to wear this, even if you have some experience with this. Because
when I was learning, I had a similar impact happen, because I was still trying to figure out how to be safe. Even with the face shield, I ended up with a mild concussion. So you
Yep.
need it.
Danny, can you talk about what she's putting on now?
okay, so we've got the drill done, and she's now going to take. Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
So what you just saw. So now what I have to do is, glue this in here. Okay, and I just do that super quickly, and then I take it off over to the belt sander and square it off. And I'm, switched out this, to a, mandrel.
Mhm.
Yep. And so the pen will kind of go over here and I'll turn it over here. Using, bushings that I don't want, so I'm gonna turn it so it is not, that overpass this.
Right.
Thickness.
So basically what the bushings do is two things. Number one, they go in and help support the wood because the inside of the bushing, and if you look real careful, just grab one of these real quick. Yeah. It's got a little collar on it. That collar sits inside the tube. And then the outside diameter of that bushing dictates how far down I'm going to turn the wood because we're going to attach some metal pieces to the pen. And then that has to match to make it look right. So
These are all
those are only used during turning, and then you take them off and they're recycled. So usually they're $5 to $6 a set, and you buy them particular to the kit. Sometimes the kit will have, you know, different bushings, and other times you'll be able to use the same bushing on different kits. Okay. So she's going to run up and get that glued. Any questions so far? I'm going to, okay, before I got interrupted. These are the ones that need a bit of instruction. This is what we call a gouge. And there are different types of gouges. You can see we've got this little smaller one, and then we've got the larger one. The large one is called a roughing gouge. Now, the roughing gouge does exactly what you think it does. It roughs out. It is primarily used on any kind of spindle work. Thanks. Okay. It's primarily used on spindle work. Okay. You can use it on bowl work if everything is already round. Okay. If it's got those big sharp edges on it, like a big block of wood, please don't use this on that because it puts way too much stress on this as those edges come around. I always encourage people to take it over to the bandsaw and just take those sharp edges off. We want to take the easy way. We don't want everything to be a challenge. Okay. So with that, this one does roughing, but a lot of people actually go in and do a majority of their project with this. It doesn't look like it would be very versatile, but it does quite a bit. And for users, particularly new ones, it's a lot easier to maneuver. This one, because it's small, has a tendency to catch more. And that's another thing that happens, another new word for wood lathes. And catches happen when you dig in too much of the little edges or the points or anything like that. And it literally digs into the wood and can launch the wood off the piece. It could tear up the wood, and in a couple of minutes, we're going to bring somebody out who has a little story about that. Okay, but you can recover from it. If it's a light catch, you can just continue on turning, turn that away, and you're good. Okay? But this is where a lot of the instruction in class happens, is with these type of tools and the other type of tools. Because to get these to work, you can bring them and put them in straight like that. Or more preferably is that you rotate the tool, drop the handle, and continue on. And that's where a lot of that instruction happens. I tell folks that the difference between doing a good cut and an okay cut is a matter of adjusting things with a couple of millimeters. And it really is. And that's where a lot of practice happens. Okay. There are other tools, as you can see. We have quite a selection here, and I think that's one of the big advantages to coming to a space like this, is because I hesitate to guess how much that would cost if somebody had to go buy that for their home shop. It's really a lot. Now, most of those tools up there have been donated. Some of them have been purchased specifically for the program here. But I have yet to find try something that I haven't been able to do with one of the tools that we have. So we have plenty. We have some duplicates up there because sometimes we need lots of these. Okay. Now, one of the problems with these is these need to be sharpened. I was at a store one day and somebody was looking at little carving gouges. And the person asked the clerk, and I was standing in the same aisle, and said, do these come sharpened? And he said, well, they're pretty sharp out of the box, but you know, you can always adjust it. And she said, well, when I need to get them sharpened, can I bring them back here? No. So we have a sharpening rig over here, and we will probably go in and do maybe a little bit of sharpening today to show you, but I don't know if we got the camera set up for that. I kind of forgot about that last night when we were setting up cameras. But these do need to be sharpened. And I know some people who sharpen in the middle of turning. They'll cut for a while, stop, sharpen, come back. And that usually that midpoint sharpening is maybe 30 seconds to a minute. Okay. Yes.
If someone wants to learn turning, what kinds of classes are there?
So I have a introduction to turning class. And that acquaints you with the lathes. It acquaints you with some of the tools, not all the tools, and you get lots of hands-on time turning. Did somebody bring their first turning project in? Okay. Thank you. See? This is what somebody made in the intro to turning class. I give folks the option of doing a project, and I got a couple of projects they want, but a lot of people like this kind of thing where they can free-form practice and get a feel for turning and do different shapes. Really isn't meant to be anything, but it gives them the experience and gets them lots of hands-on time. That's what is key to picking up this skill, is that lots of hands-on time. Okay. Did you want to say anything about that? About intro to turning class? Okay. You good? Introduce yourself.
I'm Nancy. Is that on? I'm Nancy. That's on. I literally have been training for just 3 months, I think. I took this class back in maybe December,
Mm-hmm.
and then unfortunately Christmas happened and I didn't get back to anything. But it was a great practice. You start off with this square piece of wood, and you can see on this side, like there's a lot of tear out as I was trying to make it round. And to me, that's sort of the scariest part, because when you're doing the squaring, you know, pieces start flicking off. Once you get it round, it's a little bit smoother, and then you can get a little bit more finesse with it. And that's kind of what I was trying to do with some of the other shapes, was just figuring out how to make shapes with the tools that were available and practicing on it. I then took the intro or the bowl turning class in January or February, and that's really where I've been focused since then. But this is a great practice for shaping.
Excellent. Thank you.
I don't know if people want to see it. You want to see it?
So like I said, we have people who maybe want to do a project spontaneously. Somebody said that they had somebody in their house who was a big Harry Potter fan, and she was looking at this thing on the lathe. She goes, "Can I make this a magic wand like Harry Potter has?" And I said, "I don't know why not." So we took her bit of turning and made a little magic wand. Not everybody in the class did that, but she wanted to do it, and I adjusted for her. So one of the things I do when I teach all of these classes is I really adjust things for the student. Talk to them, watch them, and coach them individually. That's one of the reasons I keep these classes fairly small, is because I can give lots of personal attention to people and help them quickly attain what they need to know. The other classes, thank you for prompting me. Okay. I knew you were here for a reason. So one of the other classes, of course, is pen turning. Okay. Now, what Leonora neglected to say is that's how she got introduced to the space. Is she contacted us and wanted to do a family pen turning class. Leonora, her husband, and her adult son, who was about to go off to college. They wanted to do a family activity. They all came out here on all the lathes, and we had a great afternoon. So pen turning, everybody walks away with a finished pen. Okay? I've yet to have anybody not finish a pen in that class. Everybody finishes. Start to finish. I can actually knock out a pen in probably, I'd say about maybe 30 minutes, 30, 45 minutes, start to finish. But for class, it's about hour and a half, 2 hours. And then we also have a bowl class, and that's where a lot of people come in. And I have a lot of people who want to skip intro to turning and immediately want to do bowl class. Not recommended. I've had people do intro to turning in the morning and a bowl class in the afternoon.
Bowls are hard.
Bowls are difficult. Okay. And I'll tell you, that person was really tired the last hour and a half of that bowl. So, but they walked out of here with the bowl finished. Yes, ma'am. I don't have a microphone. Okay. There. Mhm. Okay. Okay. All right. I'll take care of it.
Just to finish the bottle, I just learned it.
These need to be sharpened. Okay. But anyway, so you're good.
And so now I'm just gonna press it together. And I some sauce. A good part together over here.
Okay. So Doug's now doing a little bit of turning. Looks like you need to tighten that up a little bit on the chuck. So have we got the key somewhere around here? Do you have that chuck key? Oh, there it is. Okay. And like in any woodworking thing, problem solving is always a key element over here. Okay. Now, one of the things that we've done over here is this little pen press is actually homemade. They sell pre-made pen presses, and they're anywhere from $50 to $100. I looked at that and went, I got to be able to use the lathe for that. So all I did was took a couple of MT2 pieces here and then went in and drilled out pieces of Delrin rod, glued it all together, and it's basically turning the lathe into a pen press. I think I got about $12 worth of parts there. Yeah, it's in the bottom drawer. And if we get time later, I can introduce you to some of the things we have here. Behind, on the side of Doug over here is several drawers of material and tools and fixtures and various other things. I've got it labeled, I've got it sorted. And on the end over here, where you see all that wood stacked up, and this is the other, one of the other advantages to working in this space, is I've talked to a lot of our woodworkers here and said, look, if you get some really nice pieces that are end cuts that you're not going to use, don't put them in the scrap cart. Put them back here and I'll go through them and sort them. So I haven't needed to buy any kind of small pieces of wood for like over a year and a half. On the other side of the thing over here, we also have some bigger pieces that we could use for bowls. So I guess you got through. Okay, cool.
While they're doing that, we talk about we have 3 different lathes, but they're all exactly similar to you.
They're very, very similar. I kind of refer to that a little bit. This one here is obviously the largest one, 2 horsepower. It does have quite a bit of oomph to it. Give you an idea. I get a lot of questions from people all over the shop with different projects. So a guy came in, he was wanting to build table bases for a coffee table. And he didn't want to do just straight legs or anything like that. He wanted to make kind of a cone shape with the top of the cone shaved off. So what he did was he went and got sheets of MDF, 3/4 inch thick, laminated them together, cut them out into a rough circle in different things. So it's a kind of a pixelated approximation of a cone. And it was about that long. You can imagine what that weighed with glue. It was easily 35 pounds. So we put that on here and turned it. That was a bit of a mounting challenge for a couple of reasons. Number one, it was very heavy. We wanted to make sure that things were very, very stable. And what we're going to do today is really small stuff. We're not going to do anything else. We're not going to do anything dangerous, but that was a bit dangerous. I asked him to have me present when he mounted it because I wanted to verify his mount. I didn't want anything bad to happen. He mounted it on his own. We turned it on to about 200 RPM. And then this thing started rocking back and forth. Yeah, so we shut it off. We went to plan B and we mounted it here with a faceplate and back here with a faceplate that was free spinning. So it had faceplates on both ends. That way we were able to safely turn it. We got it set. I did a couple quick initial cuts on it to make sure it wasn't just going to fly apart. Turned it over to him, and over the span of 2 evenings, he did both bases and was very happy. Okay. Now, these weren't meant to be fancy wood. He used MDF. He was going to finish them and paint them, but that's what he wanted to do. These 2 guys aren't going to have nearly that horsepower. Okay. So these are 1 horsepower. This one and the other one here are essentially the same lathe, except for this one has a bed extension on it. So if somebody wants to do something a little bit longer, we have that option. The controls are very similar between the 2. They operate roughly on the same RPM range, except for this one, which will actually go down a little bit further and slower in RPM. Okay. We have articulating lights on everything, and I tell folks you can never have too much light when you're turning. These are really nice adjustable lights. We can put them just about anywhere we want. And we have 3 chucks for the lathes.
Okay, sure.
Uh-huh.
That has a tenant. Why tenant versus?
Oh.
Mortise?
Okay. Yeah, and this is more of an intermediate question. The bottom here, if you look, it's got a little raised area. That's what we call a tenon. There's different ways to mount this into a chuck. I could make a mortise, and a mortise is an interior piece. That's an example of a mortise. Okay, so it's got an open end there. There's a tenon. So in this case, we're putting it on the same chuck with the same jaws. And in one case, you're expanding the jaws to grab onto this mortise. And in this case, you're squeezing the tenon to hold it. Now, if you ask a bunch of turners which is better, you're going to get a big argument. They're going to say, oh, I always use tenons, or I always use mortises. Personally, I like mortise better for a reason that we're going to show you here in a couple minutes. And what that reason is I can take things off and put them back on very quickly. If I get to the end of my project and I think I'm completely done and I've got a tenon, then I need to cut that tenon off like I did with this piece here at the beginning. The problem with that is if I need to go back and remount it for some reason, that is an extreme challenge. You can do it, it is not easy. So with a mortise, that bowl that I picked up, actually somebody finished it, like sanding, put finish on it, took it home, was starting to use it for a salad bowl, realized that when they put the salad and the dressing in it, it actually raised the grain of the wood, brought it back in, resanded it to a higher grit, put better finish on it, and now it's fine. And if that had a tenon on it, that would have been quite a bit of work. So mortise and tenon difference. Yes, sir.
Big equipment, lots of tools.
Mhm.
One of the things that always impressed me with turning is how little it can cost to get started, by the bench top.
True.
Can you tell us how much it costs to get started?
Yeah, sure. If I was getting started, and I can relate the story of my getting started, okay? So I've only taken one official class with an instructor. Everything else I've learned after that on my own, experimenting, watching other people, doing that kind of thing. And I looked at that and went, okay, this is something I want to do. So I need to get a lathe. So I think at that time I spent about $500, and they were having a deal. They gave me the lathe and a chuck for about $500. Okay. Small lathe, actually smaller than this. Okay. Sits on the bench top, didn't have a stand, kind of like this red thing over here on the end. We use that as a buffing machine. That's actually a lathe, but we use it as a buffing machine now. Okay. Then I had to go buy tools. And the tools can run anywhere from $50 to $150 or $175 each. And one tool that I didn't explain was this guy. This is a completely different cutting system. This is called a carbide tool, and it's got a flat back. The other ones I showed you earlier had a round back, so this is going to sit flat on that tool rest, and you're not gonna roll it, you're not gonna do anything, you're just gonna move it in and out, up and down. Really easy to get started with. It will not give you a very fine finish. You will have to do lots and lots of sanding and scraping to get a clean edge on it. A lot less sharpening, no sharpening as a matter of fact, because if you look here, you see that that cutter head has a bolt in the middle of it. And what you do is you undo the bolt, you rotate the cutter head, tighten the bolt back down, and you're good. No sharpening. Okay. So I like these for certain purposes. They're really good for hollowing. They work really quick and they're really safe. You don't have a catch. That's the other thing. Very low probability of getting a catch with these. Okay. Very, very good entry-level tool, but you're not going to get those super smooth finishes. That's the problem. So if you talk to old-time experienced turners, they will say this is cheating. Don't use these. They will tell you, you know, you should suffer like they did when they were starting out. But what you're going to do is you're going to work efficiently with this. So there's nothing wrong with this. Yeah, absolutely. They've got a pointy one for detail work. And yeah. So I like, I think they have a place. I advocate as a hybrid turner to say, I'm going to use these when it makes sense, and I'm going to use the other tools when it makes sense. And if you have both of them in your arsenal, then you're good. Yes, sir. Okay, so let's take a little break. So one of the things I get a lot of questions about when it comes to turning is things like this. This is a segmented turning vase or vase, depending on what part of the country you're from. And it's a mixture of species. It's a little bit of cherry and a little bit of olive wood. The way you put these together is you cut a lot of very precise trapezoids on the table saw. You then go in and glue them together into rings. You take the rings, you make sure they're flat on both sides, you stack them up like this, and it gives you that pixelated approximation of that shape. You then take that, put it on the lathe, and start turning. Now, that reason I explain that is because Drew is going to go in and hollow this bowl. Okay? He's made it in a very similar way. He said it was a couple of different pieces and it was like leftover from somewhere else. Okay? So the good news is he made a mortise on the bottom so we can take it on and off, remounting it, and he's going in and he's doing a measurement to see how deep he can go with this. And by the way, when we take another break or at the end, there's a whole table full of sample stuff that you can come over and take a look at, and we'll answer any questions. Okay, so we've got everybody turning now. Leonora is set on her pen, and Doug is going to do a little bit of spindle turning, and he's starting off with a big chunky block of wood. This will give you an idea of what you're starting with and why it might take you a while to just jump in and turn, okay? Now, Drew is using the carbide tool for turning and hollowing here. Carbide is a bit more forgiving when I'm doing this. And the other thing is, it doesn't really care about directionality. If I was using a regular gouge, I would have to alternate the tilt of the gouge and the angle of the gouge, whether I'm going towards me or away from me. So we'll let Drew work on that for a little bit. I'm gonna head over here and take a look and see what Leonora's doing on her piece. So it looks like Leonora's gotten it round. Now Leonora is using the roughing gouge to do this. And when she's using the roughing gouge, it quickly takes down those edges. But if you look carefully at how she's doing this, you'll see that she's adjusting this as she's moving across. It's a very subtle thing to do, and the camera may not pick it up very well. Doug's doing a similar operation with his roughing gouge as well. And you'll see what he's doing there is a quick check to see how round am I. If it bounces like that, you're not round. If it's nice and level and smooth, it's round. Okay. Also, you can see that it's going to make quite a mess. There's Doug, and you see how Doug has that rolled off to the side there? Sorry, can you hear me now? Okay. So he's got that rolled off to the side, and he gets a better cut that way. Okay. As you start to work through it, you're going to feel that cut become better or worse. The other thing we did is on the break is Doug actually sharpened his tool. So that's a nice fresh edge on that tool. Yeah. Right. And that's something I show in class is that it's a really quick way to tell if you're round. It's a safe way to do it too, because you're not putting any pressure on the wood. You're just laying it on there, literally. And if it bounces, you're not round. Pardon me? Yeah. Sure. Hey, Doug, when you get a minute, could you show us if it's round or not? Oh, look at that. Really quick way to find out if you're round. Yeah. Now, see, there's parts of it that are round and parts of it that are not. So that's something you have to contend with. Sure. Let me check in speeds, okay? Drew is running about 1100 RPM. Leonora's about 1000. And Doug's about 1100. You notice not much different on the RPM there. You tend to get comfortable with a certain speed, and that's kind of what you stick with, okay? When I introduce people to this, I recommend we start with 500 to 600 RPM, and we stay that way for a little bit until you get a feel for what's going on. The problem with fast RPM is that bad things happen really quickly. So you have to be ready for that. You got to be prepared. The other thing is that with a faster RPM, you usually get a better cut. Let's see where we are now hollowing. That's pretty deep. It does help a little bit. Also, we have a depth measurement guide that I guide everybody on how to use. And that helps so you know how deep you need to go. Okay. Okay. keep in mind while Drew is doing that, the only thing holding that bowl onto the lathe is this little cutout right in here. I knew you were a smart man. Okay. The other thing is the wall of this cutout is not vertical. It has a little bit of an inset angle. That way it grabs those jaws and holds it around. Okay, if I pass this around, okay, you can take a look at that mortise there. Now that bowl is only partially finished, so it's not completely done. Okay. Now, one thing to pay attention to here is that as you get deeper in the bowl, the more the end of that tool hangs off the tool rest. You're losing a lot of your control when that happens. So at that point, you have a choice. You can either angle the tool rest in, or we have a special curved tool rest that you can use that kind of fits inside the bowl. Let's take a look how we're doing. That looks pretty good. Yeah, you're getting there for sure. So let me get the microphone here. Got a couple questions for you. So how long have you been turning?
I've been turning about 5 months now.
5 months?
Yeah, took
Mhm.
a little like month and a half break in there. Worked it crazy, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What have you found challenging about this?
I think the most challenging thing is, I mean, especially with this carbide and some of the duller tools on the end grain, you can get a bit of tear out. So just trying to combat that, especially on these turns where you're using different wood species, you can trap some of the darker dust into that maple. I do have a bit, like here, you see it's kind of looks a little dirty. I did some finishing on the bottom when I turned it before, so I want to go back over that. So yeah, relying a lot more on, I think I said it over here, on scrapers and, you know, leaving yourself some space after you use some of your rougher tools so that you can still go back and refine everything. Not
And-
have to do a ton of saving.
So let me ask, what's your plan for the rim? Okay, so it's a nice flat rim right now on the bowl. What are you planning on doing with that rim?
I just plan to round it over slightly on either end. I definitely want to get it a bit thinner,
Thinner?
but
Okay.
yeah, I'll get it down a bit more with the carbide and then go back through with a scraper just for that to get it a little closer. So this definitely does tear out some of the grain.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So David, we picked back up about 15 minutes ago, and in that 15 minutes, he went from no inside shape on that bowl, and Doug went from a rectangular stock
To this.
to round objects.
Yeah,
Pretty quick.
pretty quickly. And if you know how to use the tools, you got a little bit of practice, it's pretty straightforward. Okay. I want to hear you.
The like segments potentially coming apart?
That's a great question. Do you have any issues with the segmented coming apart? Not usually. If you do a good job, it really sticks together. I have had one occasion, I do a lot of segmented work, and I have had occasions where the entire ring has separated from one to another. And that happened very early in the turning process on one piece, and I found out I just didn't get it glued well enough. So I did a little sanding, stuck it back together, back in business. Okay.
There's an issue. Okay, you have a really hard species and a soft species.
Yeah, that's a great question. I got an example of that. This piece is not segmented. This is one species. This is Norfolk Island pine. Okay. Very interesting tree. primarily grows somewhat on the West Coast as a transplant, but it's native to the tropical islands like Hawaii and things like that. And I got this from Hawaii. Get too much back feed? Okay. Right there? Okay, that's good. So this is pine, which is normally a soft wood. These brown spots around the outside, that's where the branches come out. And this is that tree that has like a clear trunk and then the branches come out horizontally and then it's another piece of clear trunk. Well, that's a piece there. And you've got those pieces. Those are hard as a rock. The other stuff was really soft. So this was a huge challenge to turn for a couple of reasons. Number one, it came in wet. So I had to contend with that. But even if when it was wet, these brown spots were very, very hard. So as I was turning, it was a constant change between very soft and very hard. So it took a bit of practice. I had to turn a bit slower on that. I had to do a lot of sanding on that. And I'll pass this one around. You want to take a look. We also talked about grain a little bit, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how grain plays into this without putting everybody to sleep. This one is a maple burl, and a burl forms on the outside of a trunk. And what happens is some irritation gets into the wood and it kind of grows the tree around that irritation. Okay? The problem with this is when that burl grows, it confuses the grain. It's not straight. It's all interlocked and everything like this. This one, if you look at it from a distance, I've had people think that it was maybe turned out of alabaster and not maple because it's got that kind of stone look to it, but it's really a very hard maple burl. This was a big challenge here to get that because that grain kept switching on me and I had to do some very interesting techniques. I had to use what's called a negative rake scraper on it to get that final finish. So I'll pass that one around as well. Well, that's looking great. Yeah, looking great. We talked about trees. This is a big chunk of a tree that I'm going to take and turn this into a natural edge bowl. Do you see how the profile of that curves down and then back up? So that came off the tree like that. And I'm going to take this, and this is going to be the inside, this is going to be the bottom, and it's going to have a lot of that natural edge to that. I'm not going to pass this one around because it's kind of heavy. I'll leave it up here if you want to take a look at it. This is cherry, by the way. I'm going to try. I'm going to try as much as I can. I don't know how successful I'm going to be with that. Okay. I think you're okay to borrow it. Okay. Another project I have in the works is this one right here. This is a piece of oak. It has been sitting around for probably 10 years. And with that, you can see it's got all these cracks in it. And if I put this on the lathe and tried to turn it, it would fly apart. It would be dangerous. There'd be wood shrapnel everywhere. So I would be very unsuccessful if I tried to do it. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to seal it up. I'm going to pour epoxy into it. I'm going to put it in a pressure pot. If you look carefully, the pressure pot is way back in the corner. It's this big blue tank. And I'm going to put this in there filled with epoxy. I'm going to hit it with 50 PSI pressure and let it sit for a couple days and let that epoxy cure. That's going to force that epoxy in, force the air out or squeeze it if it can't come out. and I'll be able to turn this. I've done that on a couple of pieces, but nothing on this scale. So we'll see if this works. This is a small test piece right here. If this works, I've got a good section of the tree up there already. Okay. Now, do you hear those little squealing sounds? Okay. That's coming from the wood. As the wood gets thinner and you work out towards the rim, there it is again. What's happening is the wood is vibrating. That's something you want to try to avoid if at all possible. You move the tool slower, you don't put as much pressure on it, and you make sure that that tool is well supported. Okay. Sure, absolutely. So you're going to turn, and this is one of the things that is kind of difficult to coach sometimes, is knowing when to stop using one tool and switch to another, because you might hit the point of diminishing returns. So once we get to that point where we're all set, we got it all ready to go, we're going to shift to sanding. Now, where I start with sanding is very dependent on how well I've cut. If I have cut and done a really good job, I could start at 220 to 240. But a lot of cases, you might need to start at 100 or 120 and really work through those grits. And you do same thing as you're sanding anything else, you work through the grits in progression. You don't skip any steps. Now, I've got a little trick that I picked up by watching people. And you can see that Leonora's up on the sanding step through her piece. And the sandpaper she's using is for turning. It's very thin. It's not a wide sheet that's been cut down. It comes like that on a roll. And it's mesh. So the good thing about that sanding material is that because of that mesh, when it gets loaded up with sawdust, you can pick it up and flick it, and it clears the sawdust out. The other thing is you can sand on both sides of the paper. So it's a really good sandpaper. So depending on how particular you are, you can go in and sand all the way up to 600 or 800 grit. Now, what some people do is they will stop at maybe 240 or 320 and apply. Let me see if I can find it. I've got it here somewhere. This is an abrasive wax. So one of the things that we practice sometimes, particularly in bowl class, is using this. We'll take it up to maybe 320, stop, put this on it. It's a wax, and it has a little bit of pumice in it. It's got some other things in it that's a very, very mild abrasive. And then you work it in with a paper towel or a rag. And then once you finish with that, you pick back up with where you left off on the sanding. So if I left off at 320, I'd go back to 320 and sand it down. What you'll find out is because of the wax that's embedded into it, you're not kicking up as much sawdust. Okay. So what's going to happen there is you're actually collecting all that, and that mesh sandpaper will actually get a little gummy on you. But you can go through and you're not putting as much of that very fine sawdust in the air. One of the things that I really advocate around here is that once you get to the sanding step, you go in and you wear a mask, because you're very close to the material. And if you have your helmet down, it still can float up underneath. And that's the reason for wearing safety glasses and a helmet. Okay. So let's take a look. Drew, that's looking fantastic. Yeah, really nice. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Where are you in the sanding step? Last one. Oh, that's nice. It's really, really smooth. Okay. She's at 600. How we doing, sir?
Good.
That's interesting. I like that. It's a little. I can see this as a base with a little container. If you drilled that out, you have a little,
Actually, make
or you can make one of those.
a little bit bigger.
So
We'll see if it bounds.
keep on. Okay. He's making a top. He's doing his own version of a top. We'll see how it works.
Also, I've never made one.
I was thinking, that's what I was kind of thinking of those specialized whiskey glasses. I do get a question every now and then, can I use this with food? The answer is yes, if it's a good species like maple, and if you use the correct finish on it. Now, I do have, this is a good first step for finish. I've also got somewhere around here a good second step for finish, and that is true food grade finish. It's beeswax and food safe mineral oil. That's the best food safe finish. I do have other finishes down there. Let's say you wanted something that's really shiny. Now, I'm not going to put food in this, okay? So what this is also a two-step, but this is a shellac-based system. I've experimented around, I've made my own shellac, I've done all kinds of things, and I ended up going with a company out of Great Britain that's been in business since 1883. They make a two-step process. The first step is a sanding sealer that you put on, kind of like what we did with that little wax stuff, and then you go back in and continue sanding, and then you put the top coat on, which gives it a much glossier finish as well. Okay? And that top coat, I do that in thank you. Okay, those are the two pieces right there. The top coat is usually 3 to 4 coats of this, and at each step we bump the speed of the lathe up. So by the final step, I am putting last coat of finish on, and then I take it up to about 2,000 RPM, and I'm using a nice clean cloth, lint-free, and get that really good polish on that. Okay?
Watch some videos that they spray.
Usually that's lacquer. That's lacquer. I personally don't like that, particularly in this space like this. I just don't like it. It smells. And the other thing is when people spray it, they usually spray it on the lathe. And that means you got to put stuff all over the lathe, and you don't want to, yeah. Now, when I do that finish, those 2 bottles she was holding up, those are very liquid and they're very runny and drippy. So what we do is we do put some paper towels down on the bed because we don't want to get contamination down there.
You'll apply it.
Yeah, and we still apply it with a rag. And that is pretty good finish on that.
What materials do you set on the lathe?
So we can cut almost any type of wood, not pressure treated. We don't like pressure treated at assembly. Okay, so we're not going to use pressure treated wood. We could do pine. Pine is very difficult to turn because it's soft. You got to have very sharp tools. Okay. No, pressure treated wood, like for outdoor decking and buildings and things like that, ground contact, because that has a lot of chemicals in it, and it's usually very wet as well. I turned it in 2. Yep.
About epoxies.
Epoxy is fine. I've got an example here. This is a really cool little project. That's an X-Acto knife, but it has a turned handle. Before I pass this around, I will put that back in because I don't want anybody to get stabbed as you pass it around. But this is acrylic. Now, the person who did this found a really interesting blank. This is cast acrylic, but if you look carefully, you're going, there's something else in here, and there's small pine cones in here. So I'll pass that around. Now, when you turn something like this, you have to be very meticulous with your sanding. And I mean very meticulous. You can skate by on wood a little bit, but you have to be very dead on when you sand and finish that. Or else you're going to get little pitting, you could get some tear out. There's lots of bad things, there's scratches. And the sanding process with that is we usually stop at about 600 to 800 when we do wood. That was taken up to 12,000. And that's required to get that kind of finish on it. And then you're putting plastic finish on it, essentially plastic polish. That was a kit, yeah. That's a really neat little kit because then you can carry around an X-Acto knife and not stab yourself. Yeah, it is pretty cool. And it feels really good in your hand too. She did an excellent job. She's been turning about maybe, how long has she been turning? 2 or 3 months. And she just dove right into that. And, you know, because that's the thing. A lot of times, all this takes is giving somebody the opportunity, giving them the facilities to work in like this, and that allows them to grow at their own speed. That's really one of our strong suits here. Okay. Wow, Drew,
Thank you.
that looks really cool. Look at that. How quickly that went down to a nice bowl. So what's your next step?
I was gonna sand and then apply finish unless need me to step aside.
Okay. So Drew's going to do a little bit of sanding. We'll see how much dust he kicks up. We may stop it.
Lathe shavings are great for animal beds.
Okay. Unless they are walnut. Okay, don't use walnut for animal beds. Some animals have a reaction, like cats or dogs or some of the other things you need bedding for. Unfortunately, we have a lot of walnut around here. Unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, it's kind of funny. There's also a saying, anytime there's a mess that somebody doesn't clean up, it's walnut. It's always walnut. So, other questions you have at this point? Okay. So we're moving down to sanding. Look at this. Everybody's on the sanding step. Almost everybody's on the finishing step. And now Leonora is going in and using a set of abrasive waxes in ever increasing steps. That's her favorite finish. She's making a pen, and this is something somebody's going to hold in their hand. So a shellac finish could work, but it may not be the greatest finish for it. This kind of finish is going to hold up and give the user time to, you know, lots of ways to go in and adjust that to their own feel. There are grades of wax, and there's 3 grades back there. And they're ever increasing.
Talk about a hardy finish on a pen.
Yep.
Shines.
It just, yeah, the pen has been passed around. That is cool. Yeah. Yeah, that's the different steps right there. So with that, and it comes right off. Okay. So all that's being held on there with is compression. Okay. So we put some bushings on there and it's squeezed in. You've got a brass nut that fits on the end, and it just applies pressure, and that's enough to get you turning. And it comes right off. So now she's going to step in and assemble it just like before.
So you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and then that last.
Yep. Those little containers are sold by Craft Supplies USA. That's where I get them. You can get them in small versions like that. You can get them in large versions. They do last quite a while. You don't use very much on those. While everybody is finishing up. Pardon me? Sorry. Course. If you look in the sanding drawer, you might find some. Okay. You want to talk about this? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so they just wanted me to talk about this. This is my sixth bowl I've ever made. And it was going pretty good. I wanted to get a little bit fancier, doing the curved edges and then some lines. Turns out I was using the wrong tool to try and do my curved edge. And sure enough, it caught. And I don't know if you saw when you did it around, I actually glued this back together so that the piece that came off is here. I just put it back in and sanded it.
There you go.
But so that's an example.
How's it going? Good?
A little bit further.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, you saw this bowl earlier. I don't know that anybody noticed that it was, yeah, so it worked out pretty well. But yeah, so that's just some of the fun of coming here and having all the tools and being able to try different things and see what works and what doesn't work. And so, and then the nice thing too is you can go to Rockland and get these for like $8 or $10. And so even if I couldn't fix it, it was $8 or $10, and I definitely learned which tool not to use for trying to make it the top of the bowl.
Yeah. But it still looks really good. Now, what's your plan? Okay, yeah. The wrong tool was a beading tool. Okay. And the beading tool is kind of like a U-shaped with points on either end. And that actually helps you make a bead and helps you space your beads. And a bead kind of is like what we've got going on here with these lines. The problem is that it's really not designed to go around it like this. And it probably one of the points caught and that just ripped the side off and it cut right along the grain. That's why it was easy to go in and fix it. Okay. So a lot of times people would take this and go, well, I learned something, toss it. But I always encourage people to go in and, kind of see what we can do to fix it, because there's a lot of times it's a design opportunity. Okay. So what is your plan next on this?
So what I'm gonna do is I have some leftover stain, so I think I'm gonna stain where the two lines are to kind of give it some visual interest. And then I'll probably bring it back because I still have the mortise, put it on, sand it, and then do the finish, because when you do the finish with those finishes, you want to have that speed come up so that it gets hot and really sealed on there. And then I'll finish it doing that. And I think it'll be fine even though it is glued to put back on.
I think it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the plan
Yeah.
for this.
Yeah, as long as you don't use the beading tool, I think it'll be fine.
No beading.
Just a little bit of sanding here to clean up that little gotcha on the rim. And it looks really nice. It's excellent work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the what? I think this was beech or birch, one of the B words.
I think that's birch.
Birch, one of the Bs.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is, yeah, like I can get this at Rockland for like $8 or $10 for this, even this size of piece. And
Okay.
again, if it couldn't recover it, at least it was not too expensive and it was a nice wood to practice
Yeah.
with.
Now,
Take it off.
So, yeah, I did this is like it's a foot. Yeah.
and one of the things you do when you have a foot on it is if you look at it this way, it looks like the bowl is floating. So it's not all sitting flat on your table. And that foot gives it a little bit of lift. And if you look at it this way, it just goes down and it's really nice. And that's definitely one of the things we talk about in bowl class is design and how this is going to work and how it's going to look for you. This is a really nice stable foot. One of the things that you got to remember when you're getting something that you want to sit flat, you don't want just a big solid surface, because that surface has to be really perfect or nearly perfect.
But this was the first bowl I did, bowl flat. And I didn't do that foot on there. That was one of the things I practiced with like bowl 2 and 3. But so I bought this bowl back today, because now that I know a little bit more, I was like, well, let me do a little bit more to this. And because I have that mortise, I can put it back on and play around with it and see if I can make it a little bit different, a little more exciting.
Excellent. Thank you.
Beating tool was not the right tool to use.
Beating tool is beating tool. Yeah, don't use that tool. That's why we call it the beating tool, because it's a bead. I've got an example here of something I put a tenon on. All right, so this will give you an idea of how that would look different on the bottom. So you can see it's all the way smooth in here. To get that effect, I had the tenon coming out. And then what I did after I had this all finished and that all finished, sanded, put finish on, we have a jig in there. And what it allows you to do is put these large wings on the chuck, and they have rubber stoppers on them. And it comes down and it squeezes the bowl and holds it like that. It has printed on there in really big letters, do not use this faster than 600 RPM. They're not playing, okay? Because it doesn't take much to get that to pull right out like this. So what I did then is, once I had that in there, I very carefully churned that out, and now that one will sit like that. It doesn't look like it's floating. It's got a nice flat surface for it, okay? But that gives you an alternate way to go in and do a bowl, because there's lots of different ways to do this. This is another little gizmo that you can make. It's a bottle stopper. I'm not going to say anything else other than it's for usually adult beverages. Really simple to make. We have the fixtures for that in the bottom drawer. In the bottom drawer over there are all the pens and bottle stopper material. So that's where everybody's pulling stuff out of for there. And these make nice gifts. Now, one of the newer projects here is this guy here, right? You buy this separate, and then you turn that. It's got a hole drilled in the end with a little bit of a round over there. That is eventually going to get glued in with a little bit of silicone adhesive, and you've got a wine glass. Now, one of the advantages here is if I wanted to make this for a gift for a wedding, Mother's Day, Father's Day, anniversary, or something like that, I could take this into our laser room and engrave a saying or somebody's name or a date or anything like that into this, and then you have a really personalized something.
A bride and groom champagne flute like that.
Exactly.
Knock people off their feet.
Exactly.
Hey, that was a really good point I'd like to
Yeah.
talk about. When you're using a lathe, what other tools that we tend to use? I know Lenore's used the bandsaw now, a belt sander.
We've used the bandsaw, the belt sander, to prep some blanks. I will even take them over to the jointer, maybe even the planer to get them down. Because a lot of times you start off with very rough stock. Let me get another visual aid here. I can step around you, sir. That little top I made started off like this. Okay, you can see that is really rough. This came from the Claro walnut bin over at Woodcraft. It's right as you walk in, you take the left-hand door, it's right there. And I think these are about $5 or $6 a piece. And you can do a lot with these. I've made vases with them, small bud vases. The top, you could cut it up and make a couple of different bottle stoppers with it. I could even make, if I got the right size, I could even make the wine glass piece with it as well. It's really, really rough. Okay. And I could put this on the lathe as is, but the problem is I've got all these really rough edges coming at me. So I could take this over to the belt sander and just kind of do this with it on all the 4 edges and kind of prep that a little bit. If I was really concerned about it being totally square, and sometimes you really need a square piece of wood, then I would use the jointer, the planer, and the table saw to square up that piece of wood. Most of the time, though, when people have said, here's some scraps, all I do is take it over the miter saw and trim it down, because this was part of a piece that was probably about 6 feet long. And I've got enough for probably 4 or 5 classes in this now. And we use things like this in our intro to wood turning class. I like this because I can give people the experience of cutting high-end wood rather than saying, oh, here's a piece of poplar, here's the cheapest thing I found at Home Depot to practice with. I'll give you a real piece of wood. And sometimes people do some really cool things and take it home. And I encourage them to keep it. So that way, 4 or 5 months or a year later, they can look at that thing and say, that's where I was. Okay. The other thing is you can get wood like this. Now this is pre-finished, kind of. They'll label it and say it's a 4x4 by something. And if you measure it, it's not exactly 4x4. So one of the things that we do when we go to mark this before we mount it is I have everybody mark all 4 corners, because you will find out very quickly it is not truly square and you need to find pretty much the center of that. That's why Doug was really successful with that, is because he measured all 4 corners before he mounted it, marked the dead center on it, and it didn't wobble.
My question, you should center it before you cut around the corners.
Yes, if I'm going to do something like that, I could center it without rounding the, after I round the corners, but it's best to do that as well. Drew, you're making fantastic progress. And you've already started on another one. It's addictive, isn't it? Yeah. Wow. That is very impressive, Doug. That's a very cool piece of wood, too. I believe that's canary wood. Sometimes you buy pieces in the store and it's not labeled. Right. I'm doing diagonal from all 4 corners, and then you'll be able to locate that center fairly accurately. And we don't mark it with just a pencil. What we do is I've got a center punch. And with that center punch, we push down until it clicks and it puts an indentation. And that way we can very accurately locate it between centers.
I usually forget to have it. That's what it is.
Of course, that's all right.
Workflow available. I'm still a little uncertain on the setup.
The setup is very particular to what you're going to do. Okay. If you are, doing a bowl, the setup is a bit different, because first step in a bowl is to take that, and we didn't see that, I didn't call that out very clearly on what Drew's working on, but what we did with that is he was using a faceplate, and a faceplate is just a metal plate with a bunch of holes in it, and you screw that down after you locate the center, and then you spin that on and it threads onto the head right there.
Is that document?
I don't have it written down. You know, and if we're doing spindles, it's going to be different still. So there's quite a bit of variance on that. It's more of a practice than it is, you know, something that. Leonora, what kind of wood is that? It's yellow. Okay. You know, you're really close. And I kind of set you up for that joke. That's actually called yellow heart. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But feel pretty much all of the seed.
Right.
Was that on purpose or is this a likelihood of over time?
That is an artifact over time. Okay. Right. The wood will dry and shrink and the glue doesn't. And that's, then you're feeling the glue. This one over here, I did about 4 years ago, different species. Yeah. Yeah, same thing.
Okay, so be aware that that's.
It is going to happen. Okay. Now, with this, sometimes I get, you know, what kind of glue did you use? And I usually use Type Bond 3 on this. If I am doing a medium to dark colored wood. And the reason I'm using Type Bond 3 is because I get a long working time on it. Okay. I don't want to use something I'm going to have to really rush on this because I got to get everything in here. Each one of these rings has 12 segments. They all have to align very carefully with each other and then flat across the top and bottom, or as flat as I can get them. So it doesn't allow much leeway. This is one of the pieces that we use. That's okay. You're at the point now. What are you doing? Are you parting?
Trying to get the point a little bit down.
Okay. 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 So I get questions about this sometimes. This is a mallet that we use sometimes to persuade things. It actually has had some use. This is a piece of ash. Okay. And with that, I used one tool and no sanding. Okay. And it's kind of the joke that I tell in intro to turning class and use this as an example. We have some skew chisels up there. And if you've ever looked at turning or thought about turning, there's a lot of horror stories about skew chisels. So as an experiment and demonstration one time, I did this completely with a skew, start to finish, and no sanding. I didn't explain very much while I was turning. I was highly focused on what I was doing. That's why I'm not doing a skew chisel demo today. Now that top where it's scarred, that's where it's actually been used a lot. How's it going with that? That's looking
Well, there's some
great.
cool marks and
Yeah,
stuff there, but I'll finish it up.
not bad, not bad. Oh, so we got another one going too, huh? I know, once you get started. Let's see how we're doing here. Oh, you're getting that really fine stuff. This is really good work, Doug. I like this.
First time making a top.
Well, If it doesn't work as a top, it looks cool anyway. That's the main thing. As long as it looks cool, we're okay. Shane, I forgot to mention, and maybe you want to reinforce this, that when the demo is over, the audience has to stay and clean up. Is that correct?
Oh,
Yeah. No, we have tradition every time we have a turning class, you have to clean up your own stuff. There we go. That was a nice, gentle dismount. And that's all that's left over on that top end, just that piece. So you can be very efficient in the way you use that material. So he had that one long block, and we're gonna have two that look like this from the ends, and that's it. Okay, almost there. There you go. So let's see what we got. Okay, that's fine. Let's see that and that. Let's see that too. So out of that one block, we got these two pieces we're going to throw away. The rest of it is right here. So all we need to do is do a little bit of sanding on that point to refine that. And there's a top start to finish. Excellent work, man. So he's going to give it a quick sand probably up on the disc sander. Look at this.
Dust in there, but I can go back and look that later.
Sorry if I pass this around?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Pass that around. It's still actually warm. Did you pass this around yet? Okay. We don't have to worry about that right now. Okay. So if you want to jump in and. Okay. Drew, what did you use to finish it?
Oh, yes. It's from a brand called Waller Soil, but it's mostly Carnauba wax. So it's a little bit higher shine than beeswax, but still just wax. Say what Carnauba wax?
Carnauba. Or some people call it Carnuba. I've heard both pronunciations. The other important piece that I forgot to mention is that if you have longer hair, it is absolutely mandatory that that be pulled back. Absolutely. Okay. And if you have any kind of dangly jewelry or anything like that, you need to stuff that inside your shirt, anything that could be caught in there. You'll notice that I wear this and I wear this for protection more than anything else. When I'm turning, I actually zip it up really tight so I don't get a ton of sawdust and debris inside here. And it's short sleeve so I can reach across the lathe and I don't get caught. What's that? No gloves. Excellent. No gloves. That's a tough one sometimes because when you start turning some things, particularly like a wet wood, you notice it gets hot as it comes off. You get that wet and hot thing, and it's kind of a surprise. So with that, I highly recommend that you don't wear gloves. It's going to be tempting sometimes. I have seen people on YouTube wear bicycle gloves, the ones without the fingers. It's still a little dicey. What I have had happen, particularly in wet wood conditions, I'll take blue tape and put a piece of blue tape like right here around my hand, and that shields me a little bit. So that's pretty good. Okay. So you're going to go in and set a couple of little design lines, right? Okay. And what tool are you using? The skew. She's using the forbidden tool. I tell people not to grab the skew because it's a very tempting looking tool. It's very difficult to handle. And it goes south on you real super quick. How's it working?
Yeah, I chipped the edge there.
Oh,
Sand it.
okay.
Rest is good though.
Yeah. Other questions? I know I've been chattering on for a while.
Use the big tool across the
Mhm.
crack. If you wanted to add definition to those lines, do you ever use wire?
I have some, and you could. And it's these little things, they look like torture devices. Let me see if I can work around here. You grab one. They actually are torture devices. This is made from piano wire. And they have the little knobs on the end where you actually grab it and put it down. And it's high friction. It gets very hot. This wire will actually start to glow and you'll get smoke.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's spindle.
No, you could use it on spindles or bowls. Okay. Yeah, but you're just applying it from the top down. This is where you have to be really careful. You have to pull that tool rest way back. And you're just going down and you're holding it and you will see smoke. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you will get a very dark line. Okay. You don't want to try to wrap it around like that because that's bad. This stuff will hurt you if you're not careful. I can pass this around if you guys want to take a look. I've got several up there. There's slightly different thicknesses. Travis. Yeah. So what topics have I not covered that you are interested in?
Where's the place that you went to get the block of wood for like that right?
You can get some inexpensive wood at Woodcraft here in town, or you can go to Rockler up in Round Rock. I don't know if they're instituting a, passport control system when you go from Travis County to Williamson County. I'm not sure. Kidding. I'm kidding. Joking. But you can find one of the advantages at Rockler, they have a bin of like miscellaneous stuff. It is not labeled. It is sold by the pound. So have at it. Okay. The problem with buying bowl blanks is this, or any kind of turning wood, is when you get smaller pieces, it's pretty cost effective. But when you start getting anything over an 8-inch diameter, that curve in cost goes like this. So I've seen pieces that are really large sell for $200 to $300. Whereas if a smaller piece, same species, same figuring, could sell for $10 or $15. There are plenty of places online to buy wood as well. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Actually, the question is, so everybody can hear because they're running the cold saw, is Drew's bowl has a nice flat top, and that's what he was going for. Could you make that top thicker, wider, and then put an inlay in it? Absolutely. You could just cut a groove in there, and then I've done that, and it's pretty straightforward. What you do is you put a groove in there and make a little channel, and then you would take a little bit of adhesive and you get your inlay material. Your inlay material could be anything like turquoise or any other type of semi-precious stone or glass or plastic or anything like that. And then you would inlay that and let that dry completely, and it's going to look terrible. It's going to look all rough and bumpy. You put that on the lathe and you can turn it and you get it flat. Now you turn it, yeah, exactly. So you turn it and then you look at it and you go, oh, okay, parts of it look good, parts of it look bad because there's all these craters in it. You take it off the lathe, you take some finer material and put in it and glue that down and then go. Now, what do I use for glue? You could use CA adhesive, super glue. You could also use something I've discovered about a year or two ago is ultraviolet activated epoxy. It comes in one bottle. You don't have to mix it. It's a super black bottle because if it's exposed to ultraviolet light, it will cure. It comes from the dentistry industry. That's what sometimes dentists use. That's how I made my wedding ring. So I bought the ring blank already made. It's got the channel cut in it. And the reason I bought it instead of making it is wood is not going to put up with the abuse that I would put it through. This is ceramic and it's also very lightweight. And I filled it with lapis lazuli and used the ultraviolet epoxy on it and put that together. And this took very little time to turn. You can buy these ring blanks for less than $10. And then how much money do you want to spend on the fancy stone? Oh, it is rock solid. I mean, it is. I mean, it's hard ceramic.
With UV epoxy, what's the depth limit, right? Because you can't have like.
Right, I can't do a foot, but for that channel, that's fine. And I've done some tests with it. I've actually dyed it. I've recommended UV epoxy to a number of people out here on their projects. One person had a tabletop that was just full of bug holes. I mean, just riddled with bug holes. But, if you tried to do regular epoxy with that, you've had to mix up a lot of epoxy. You've had to go in and let it cure, and then it would have been terrible. And with UV epoxy, it cures in like minutes. The maximum depth I've done is probably, I'd say maybe a quarter of an inch. Quarter of an inch. So it's pretty good. I mean, I really like it in its case, for what you're doing. And you can put regular dye into it. You can embed stone into it.
It doesn't set up
Until it's UV. Now there's UV rays here. You could not hit it with UV. Thank you. You could go in and what I do is I've got the bottle I bought came with a UV light and it activated it. And I looked at this light and it was kind of weird looking because it's like a flat panel and then it had ultraviolet LEDs in it. And then it had two little feet that come off it like this. So it had this long space that was open. I went, that looks odd. They didn't make it for this. This is a repurpose of something. I did some research and I found out that some fingernail polish is UV curable, and that's what that was designed for. Is you put your hand in it, just the right size for somebody's hand. So, and it works within a minute or two, it is fully cured and you're ready to go rather than waiting, you know, a week for epoxy to fully cure. Yeah, I see yeah, because we're bumping time. People are going to start coming in using the shop.
Stay and talk. now.
Yeah, we can chat whatever we want to do. So what questions do you have that I haven't addressed already or something you want me to cover again? You take a class. How do you find out about classes? We have them at assembly.org/classes. I will tell you right now that my classes are usually pretty darn full, several weeks to a month out. I also do one-on-one if you would prefer that. I've done a couple of those mentor type things before. I'm looking for other turning instructors to take some of the load off me because I can only teach so many classes on a weekend. As a matter of fact, I got 2 intro to turning classes tomorrow that are both full.
No pin classes. correct?
There are no pen classes, but I was going to say we have a budding pen turning teacher right here in front of us. Yeah. So, yeah, we're talking about you. But she has written a potential syllabus for a pen class because that's her passion. So she's going to start doing that. Yeah. Yeah. And Drew is currently shadowing me on intro to turning, and he's going to start picking up some of the intro to turning classes so we can start offering more. We have seen a decided uptick in the turning area for the past 6 to 12 months. We've changed up the way we teach. We've changed up that few things. I've redone the turning wall so it's easier to find the tools. We've got some organization. We've acquired more things so they're easier to use. I want everybody to be successful. I work on a success model in all the classes. I have not had anybody take the bowl class and not be able to finish a bowl. I know some people are going to take that as a challenge. I'll show him. I won't finish my bowl. All right. Thank you, folks. Thank you. And thanks to the presenters. Thank you. Thank you. Hey. Hey. All right. I'll be around if you want to talk.